This thing is the roller coaster of all roller coasters when it comes to what is going on with that program right now. But they host Alabama. And by the way, we don't have point spreads. BetUS will have them by Friday night into Saturday. That's when point spreads come out, okay? My guess is that Alabama will be a slight road favorite. And what's interesting about this game is really three things. One, Kentucky is obviously coming off that loss to LSU at the buzzer we talked about on Thursday morning show. Two, on top of that, Alabama is coming off an overtime win, which they took care of business against Florida at home. And three, and I do think this is important, usually when you're coming off a bad loss, you want to go home. But Kentucky has lost 3 of its last 4 games at home, going back to Florida, going back to what was it? It was Florida, Tennessee, Gonzaga. Then they beat Ole Miss, and then they've been on the road the last 2. And so with Kentucky, listen, what I would say, we spent a lot of time talking about them on Wednesday. We don't need to go through everything Wednesday night into Thursday. But the bottom line is really 2 things in this game. The first thing, they need to come out locked in. And this is, I think, the frustrating thing if you're a Kentucky fan. Kentucky fans, to their credit, a couple things. First off, I looked it up. Get-in price for this game is like $100 as of Thursday night. For a team that is struggling, that is driving their fan base crazy, that isn't even winning at home. Credit to you, Kentucky fans, because you are still showing why you are an elite program with an elite fan base that cares about college basketball, frankly, unlike pretty much any fan base in the sport, okay? Your team's struggling. It's still $100 to get into Rupp Arena, and it's not like Rupp Arena, there's only 8,000 seats. It's a 22,000-seat arena or whatever it is. So credit to Kentucky fans, but I think the big thing and the frustrating thing with Kentucky so far this year, it's been a situation where they have not been good at home, especially early. You have had great home crowds, and that team does not show up ready to play. The doors got blown off the building against Tennessee. What was it, like 22 to, I'm making it up, like 14-6, something like that? The Gonzaga game, Gonzaga got up big. They had control at the half. And so, 1, Kentucky has to play well. But 2, and I don't think this will be an issue, there simply cannot be mental lapses. Because if you watch that LSU game on Wednesday night, they were in complete control. Kentucky fans have complained, justifiably so, all year long about what they call the middle 8. The last 4 minutes of the first half, the first 4 minutes of the second half. Kentucky has not been good. They were great during that stretch. They went on a 16-0 run at one point. And then they just let their foot off the gas. And so for Kentucky, it's about coming out strong, but it's about maintaining it for 40 minutes, something that really, outside of that Auburn game last Saturday, they have not done. Now, from the Alabama perspective, listen, I've said it 10 times in the last week, so I'm not going to oversell Bama, but I truly believe this might just be Nate Oates' best coaching job at Alabama. We've talked about it again and again. But this is a guy that lost 5 of his top 6 scorers from a year ago. 2 first-round picks, Brandon Miller, Noah Clown. Lost his entire coaching staff. Remember, during the summer, he had no coaches. He was recruiting by himself in the portal trying to put a roster together. And so the team, I believe, is overachieving. They have a 1-game lead in the SEC standings. And I think they're exceeding expectations. What's interesting about them, they're the reverse Kentucky. They're not only getting better over the course of the season, but what was once weaknesses are becoming strengths. I thought it was interesting. So they beat Florida in overtime on Wednesday at Coleman Coliseum. And what I thought was interesting about that game was that in that game, Alabama, they're known as this 3-point shooting team. You know, Alabama shot 25% from 3 against Florida. They shot 8 for 32 in that game. But what they did well, they had 56 paint points. And what was interesting was credit to both teams because Todd Golden, the Florida coach, talked about limiting threes. Florida did that. But Nate Oates said, hey, Florida is one of the best rebounding teams in the country. If we don't, to use a bad pun, bring our hard hats, we're screwed. And they did. 54 paint points, in that game. I thought this was interesting. They had 21 offensive rebounds, and overall 56 rebounds, and they out-rebounded Florida, one of the best, they finished with, let me make sure I have these stats right. They out-rebounded Florida by 10, 54 total rebounds, 21 offensive rebounds. And what's especially interesting about that stat, I keep going deeper and deeper, this is what you get behind the box score, is that Alabama, you know who was basically their leader in offensive rebounds? 5 from Aaron Estrada. Great name, by the way. 5 from Aaron Estrada, 8 rebounds overall. He's like a 6'1" guard. Rylan Griffin, a wing, 6 rebounds, including 4 on the offensive glass. 8 rebounds for Grant Nelson, 7 for Mark Sears. But what's interesting is if you look at that box score, 21 total offensive rebounds, which I think is a strength, but it could also be used as a weakness. Because if you're sending all 5 guys to the glass, you know what that allows for? It allows for runouts and it allows for fast breaks. And so when I look at this game, I'm going to make a pseudo bold prediction. I'm picking Kentucky to win. And there's a few reasons. One, I do think, I don't want to say that their season, like everything everyone has said about them is completely justifiable. If you're frustrated, if you're mad, if you're angry, if you're whatever. But I think we also do have to be realistic about the season, not make excuses, but also be fair about some of the losses. They lost at the buzzer to LSU. If they just, if that ball is an inch to the left and it clanks out, they win the game and it doesn't matter. And that was in a spot, by the way, where it was like everybody knew that was a trap game. We talked about it on Tuesday. We talked about it on Wednesday. It was a trap game. You destroyed Auburn on the road. You have Alabama coming to town, and in between, you got to take care of LSU. So you get one more stop, and you got the stop. The ball just bounced the right way to them. Ball goes in the basket, game over. You lose to Florida, which, by the way, Florida's been playing really well in a game where you kind of controlled it for like 39 minutes, and you kind of melted down in the last minute. So you have that game. That was in overtime, by the way. Gonzaga, you had the ball with under 30 seconds to go, a chance to tie it without 2 starters. So I'm not making excuses, but what I am saying is Tennessee was inexcusable. I thought South Carolina was inexcusable. A&M, by the way, you lost in overtime. So this is, to me, about putting together 40 minutes. I don't think they're as far off as other people do. And I also do think you're going to get a good effort from Kentucky. Give me a Kentucky win. I do think it's going to be high scoring. I also think that the matchups kind of are advantageous. Alabama wants to play fast. Alabama wants to get up and down. Now, Alabama's probably a little bit better coached. No disrespect, John Calipari, but it's the truth. But at the same time, I also do think that matchup is probably advantageous for Kentucky because they just have better players. So give me a Kentucky win, 82-80. I do think the Wildcats get the win.